Okay, I'd like to just encourage everyone to come in and have a seat so we can get started. Not on?
Okay.
Now on. Okay. So I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to all of you and appreciate you very much your joining us this afternoon. My name is Susan Johnson. I'm the president of the American Foreign Service Association. It's a particularly good time from our perspective anyway to be having a discussion about the European Union and the Euro. 2012 marks the 20th anniversary of the Maastricht Treaty and the 10th anniversary of the adoption of the Euro as a common currency. And as we all know, both of these issues have been very much in the news lately. I'd also just like to mention to those of you who may not know that this event has come about as a result of the Foreign Service Journal, the monthly publication of AFSA, devoting its February cover to this topic. And if you haven't already read the two excellent focus articles in this month's issue, I'd highly recommend them to you. Copies of the journal are available outside if you don't have one. Our three panelists today are all able to bring discrete points of view and perspectives to bear on the issue. You have their bios on the chairs where you're sitting, so I'm not going to go into detail about that, but I would just like to say that Ambassador of Denmark, Ambassador Peter Taxe Jensen, I don't know if I have that right, but of Denmark, will speak to the issue from the perspective of an EU member nation that sits at the table when decisions are being made about crucial problems facing the EU and its currency. Jeffrey Baker, right here at my left, brings 12 years of experience working on European economic issues and the perspective of the Treasury Department, which we believe is a vital perspective to include in any discussion of this issue. And our moderator, my colleague Ambassador Ed Rowell, served as U.S. Ambassador to Bolivia, Luxembourg, Portugal, and brings the experience of a long Foreign Service career. He also lectures frequently on European Union issues. So in addition to our panelists, you all play an important role here this afternoon. We rely and really welcome your questions to kind of help us direct this discussion and conversation in the most productive way and in the way that is of most interest to you. So I just want to tell you right up front that be thinking of the kinds of questions that you'd like to ask and don't be shy. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over now to Ambassador Rowell to get started. Ed?
Okay. Can everybody hear this? Wonderful. First step is to make sure it works. Thank you very much for the introduction, Susan. I don't have a statement to make. That's not my function. But I would invite our two visitors, if either of you would like to say anything, Ambassador Taxe Jensen.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Before we start the discussion, I think I want to make two proposals. First of all, I am a stand-in because the intention was to have the EU ambassador. He was not able to come, and I'm here because we have the EU presidency. That's the first thing. The second thing is maybe more important. I'm a lawyer, so when you're going to discuss economy, please have that in the back of your head. I have been in the United States. I actually came to the US in September of 2009 and 2008, sorry, and just after that things fell apart in New York where I was. I don't think it was because of me, but that crisis started over here, and as you know, that has now gone off to Europe, and we are fighting more with this issue than you have been here in the US. I think if you look at it from sort of in a strategic way, many critics said from the outset that the European leaders were doing too little, too late, and this might be part of the reason why we are still faced with this crisis 2 years down the road. My point is that I think that European leaders are now sort of catching up to that. If you look at what has been done in the last 6 months since October of last year, where decisive steps were taken. I think now we are getting in a situation where we get the right tools in place to fix what was not fixed back in 1991 when the economic and monetary union was first established. At that time, politicians decided to do what was possible politically, and that meant that we couldn't go as far as we are going to go now, namely also put fiscal instruments in the hand of Brussels instead of leaving that with the national authorities. What we are seeing, and I think that would be my sort of endpoint as an answer, is that Europe has been faced with many crises over the years, and every time we have been faced with a new crisis, we have taken steps forward and not backwards. Every time we look back, we have actually gone through difficult discussions, and we have 27 and soon 28 member states with national parliaments that needs to catch up with the process. But every time, yeah, the response from European leaders has been more Europe, not less Europe. And this is also the response that we see coming out of Germany.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that assessment. I think initially there was some concern of too little, too late, but it does feel like, particularly in the last 6 months, that European policymakers in their response are sort of catching up and taking the necessary steps. And I think we also agree that the underlying commitment to the euro area is there and is strong, and it's absolutely crucial, because in the end this is a European construction, and only Europe can sort of preserve, its own sort of its currency union. No one else can be more Europe than pro-Europe than Europe itself. When I was thinking about today's discussion, I thought one of the things I did want to sort of, coming from a Treasury economist perspective, this arguably was one of the few issues that maybe economists actually predicted could possibly happen. I mean, and back in the 90s, particularly when the euro area was getting close to launch, I think a lot of economists, including here in the States, flagged that it missed some key elements that you need for a successful currency union, and one was sort of labor mobility. Although I think over time Europe was seeing more and more labor mobility, but I think the element which has really come into play is the lack of a system of fiscal transfers. Because the reality is the United States is a monetary union, and we have regional variations in our economy. California can go in recession for its own reasons that have nothing to do with Virginia or New York, but we have a federal fiscal system which, when their unemployment costs go up, their tax revenues fall, we can help offset some of those costs. So what you had is you have regional disparities among the euro area economies, and when and large economic imbalances that got developed over time. And I think the important question is it wasn't just public sector. This is a point which I think a lot of times people miss. Ireland and Spain were Maastricht compliant, so and it's not clear to me that anything that's being done today would have affected Ireland and Spain in any way. They were compliant with the rules. So there's a lot of focus on Greece and breaking rules, and yes, that's true. But the other vulnerable countries were more or less compliant with the rules. What happened, though, is they developed private sector imbalances, particularly in Ireland and Spain, and then when the bubble burst and they needed to make the adjustment, there was nothing there to help offset the bubble-related cleanup costs. And I think it's that adjustment in the context of the monetary unions without the exchange rate flexibility and with a monetary policy that arguably is set more probably according to the conditions in Northern Europe than in Southern Europe, makes that adjustment, I think, very longer than it would be otherwise. And then the longer the adjustment is, I think the more difficult the politics are. And this is, I think, where the Foreign Service particularly appreciates is, how do you sustain years and years of fiscal austerity. the politics, ultimately the solution and the way forward is going to be a political one, and reaching agreement among the members. And I think, you know, again, the reality, they're going to have to take, there are trade-offs, they're going to have to take some decisions which may not be the morally satisfying decision, but do so in a way that actually limits the costs of the crisis and preserves the union over the long term. But I think you're right. More Europe really is the answer.
Just two comments on one comment. I fully agree that, and I think I said that myself, that sort of we all knew that what we had coming out of Maastricht was not a perfect economic and monetary union. But that's the way Europe works. You need to take it step by step and face the challenges once you see them. On the point of labor mobility, yes, we don't have the same language. We have actually many different languages, so that's something that hampers it. But even though Denmark is not part of the Eurozone, just before the crisis hit, we had an extremely low unemployment rate. And how did we manage that in order to continue doing what we wanted? Well, we had a lot of workers from other parts of Europe. So we had a lot of Poles and Poles and others who came to Denmark and worked on infrastructure projects and other things. What happened when the crisis hit? We had an unemployment rate of around 2.5–3%. Well, they went back, so that had sort of stabilized our economy in a way that we didn't have to pay the high unemployment benefits for some of them. Now it's our unemployment rate has gone up to about 6%. So manageable. But this flexibility is not the same as you have here, but it is beginning to work, you know, because part of the construction is also the free movement of labor.
Yeah, the Nordics have a lot of lessons, particularly in the labor market flexibility that the countries in Southern Europe could learn from.
Okay, I'll try to ask a couple of questions, and then we'll move to all of you. And Mr. Baker, I have this. We've all seen the television clips of rioting in Greece. One has the impression that the Greeks are about at the limit of what they're prepared to offer. It's hard to tell how the Euro countries are going to respond, although they certainly haven't yet said they're going to be ready to disperse the funds that Greece needs in order not to default on its debt. And if it does default, there is a lot of talk about exiting the Eurozone. How would that hit the United States?
Well, I mean, clearly, we spend a lot of time on Europe, and because Europe is, I think, right now the single clearest known risk to our own economic recovery. I mean, everyone, I think, knows the basic facts. Europe is our largest trading and investment partner. I mean, or they're the largest single source of investment in the United States. They're our sort of key sort of ally and partner on just a whole range of, not just economic, but also foreign policy issues. But, and we have now to the most vulnerable sort of economies in Europe, like Greece, our direct exposures are pretty limited. I mean, again, Greece, a lot of this is a function of size. I mean, Greece is a relatively small economy, but we do have significant exposures to the large economies of Europe, particularly what they call the core, France and Germany, and a lot of those institutions do have exposures to Southern Europe. So there are clearly risks there. But again, I think if there is sort of an event in Europe, I think even more so than the direct exposures and the trade channels, the concern is just the broader kind of financial volatility, confidence effects. I mean, everyone can see on the news whenever there's bad news coming out of Europe. I mean, our stock market, moves, sort of accordingly. And our economy is recovering, and I think the news gets better and better. Today we got some additional good labor market news, but I don't think anyone believes that we are sort of decoupled or would not be sort of significantly impacted by a shock out of Europe. So and we sort of, so that's, you know, we maintain it's our first best strategy is to have, you know, Europe do what it needs to preserve its own currency union, and that's, you know, the European leaders have said that time and time again. Chancellor Merkel has said that time and time again. She said herself, you know, the answer is more Europe, not less Europe. And Europe clearly has the capacity. They've got the resources. The Eurozone is, as an economy, is the second largest economy in the world. You know, so I think, and I said we're hopeful, given the steps that have happened, particularly in the last several months, that they're going to get there. But you know, the politics are difficult. You have to have 17, you know, members agree. You know, we used to have the Articles of Confederation, and that turned out to be quite difficult. So we do have some historical experience, and we eventually moved to a fiscal union as a result. So.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador, but I'd like to add then one question to you can deal with all of it. It's hard to read from this side of the Atlantic whether the Eurozone's leaders are ahead of or behind their publics. What is public opinion regarding how this crisis should be handled? And does it give those leaders the latitude they need to make some tough decisions in the next few weeks?
Thank you for that question. I'll say something else now. I think just first on Greece, I think there's many good things, and maybe also in the public opinion, I'll get back to that you shouldn't pour good money after bad. But I don't think that is actually what we're doing in Greece. There's a lot of hacking at the moment, as you know. Greece just passed the legislation, and there's a little more pressure on Greeks politicians that they will live up to all the measures that have been agreed. And even though it has been said, everybody thinks that they are going to have their first new program, so it will not default before the 20th of March when they have this deadline. But there is discussion, well, what happens if Greece should default? And this discussion has begun. People compare it to Lehman Brothers and think it will have the same effect. I don't think that is the case, because we have to remember Lehman Brothers came as a big shock to everybody. Nobody had expected Lehman Brothers to happen. People have been looking at Greece for a very long time now and seen that as a problem. So if something should go wrong in Greece, it is actually something that has been calculated into the minds of those who react. First point. Second point is that we spent actually a lot of time also in Europe to build the so-called firewall, which is actually to protect contamination, or whatever you call it, from Greece to other economies in Europe. There's discussions how high does this firewall need to be, and there's also discussions across the Atlantic about that. But there is a will among politicians in Europe to actually build a firewall that could.
Mr. Ambassador, I think, I'm not sure that thing is picking up.
I think it is, but
Okay.
I'll speak up.
That's better. Good.
On the question of public opinion, I think that was the reason why it took some time for European leaders to step up to the necessary decisions. But my impression is now, even though you have groups in different countries who are opposed to this, but my general expectation is that in other parts of Europe there is people, it has been possible for European leaders to explain to their populations that if we are not doing this, it will be much worse for our own economies as well, and that this argument has actually made it. Look at Germany. I mean, they benefit every day from the euro because they have a much lower interest rate than they would otherwise have. It has a very positive impact on their exports and so forth. So it's not so difficult to explain to the German worker that this also in his interest that Germany takes European leadership steps in order to solve the crisis.
Thank you. And now I'll throw the questions open to the floor. Somebody has? Oh, And there's a microphone in the middle if you'd like to get up and... So we're...
Good. Yeah, well, the concern, I think, is that the standard answer every time the situation gets worse is more and more austerity. And I think Krugman has demonstrated pretty clearly, at least to me, that there's no austerity way out of this. I think we're changing our point of view here in the U.S. That if you're going to pay down debt, you can't do it during a recession, or you'll risk getting into a spiral with less revenue, trying to extract more and more money from a shrinking economy. So is there any thinking in Europe about we got to grow these economies, particularly in investments that have high rates of return, high factors of from what you put in, what you get out.
Thank you.
The multiplier effect is what I was looking for.
Well, I think, that's, yes, I can say there's a lot of thinking about that. Everybody realizes that you can't just get yourself out of the black hole by cutting, cutting, and cutting. So therefore there's a focus in the Union, and if you look back at the latest meeting of European leaders on the 31st of January, the main theme of that meeting was actually growth and jobs, and how do we create growth and jobs. So this side of the medal is being looked at as well. My government has the presidency of the European Union at the moment. We have identified 4 sort of priorities for our presidency, and one is a responsible Europe, dealing with all the necessary decisions that we're looking at now. But a second priority is actually to create a dynamic Europe. And here we're looking at what can be done in order to start promoting growth, increase the competitiveness of European member states,